The year is 1396. You stand in Westminster Abbey, your prayer book trembling, about to witness a wedding that defies all understanding. Before you is King Richard II of England, a man of 29 in his prime, and beside him his bride. She is a child of 6. This is not a fairy tale. This is a ruthless political calculation, and the little girl is its centerpiece. Her name is Isabella of Valois, and she is about to become a queen. To grasp the sheer audacity of this union, you must first see the chessboard of Europe. England and France are locked in the 100 Years' War, a conflict so long it has bled generations dry. Both nations are exhausted, their treasuries empty, their land scarred. Peace is not a desire, it is a desperate need. But peace between bitter enemies requires an unbreakable bond. A treaty can be torn, an oath can be forsaken. A marriage, however, especially one involving a king and a princess, creates a living, breathing alliance. This is the cold logic that delivered a 6-year-old French princess to the doorstep of the English crown. Isabella's world was never one of simple childhood. Born in 1389, she was the daughter of King Charles VI of France, a man increasingly known as Charles the Mad. Her father's terrifying episodes of psychosis, where he believed his body was made of glass or fled from phantom assassins, meant the French court was a place of profound instability. Her mother, Isabella of Bavaria, was a political survivor, learning to wield power during her husband's absences. From her earliest memories, Isabella understood she was not just a daughter, but an asset. Her value was measured not in love, but in leagues of territory and sacks of gold. The proposal, when it came, was breathtaking in its scope. England's King, Richard II, grieving his beloved first wife, was presented with an offer to end the war. He would receive the hand of the French king's eldest daughter, Isabella, and a dowry so massive it could rebuild his kingdom. In return, a 28-year truce. The girl's age was an obstacle, but the French negotiators spun it as a virtue. She would be raised in England, molded by its customs, becoming a bridge between the two cultures. The marriage would be a name only until she came of age. What could possibly go wrong? For Richard, it was an answer to crisis. He needed an heir, and his kingdom needed peace. When he saw Isabella's portrait, chroniclers noted not desire, but a kind of melancholy pity. Here was a child who would need his protection. The deal was struck. The first ceremony at Calais was a stark, diplomatic affair. Isabella, 7 years old, was draped in a gown of cloth of gold, so heavy she could barely walk. Richard, in a gesture that would define their relationship, knelt to her level to place the ring. He was gentle, almost paternal. This was not a monster, but a man playing a grim part in a royal pageant. Her coronation in London the following year was a spectacle designed to sell the peace to the public. The crowds were so immense, people were crushed. They came to see the child queen, this living symbol of an end to war. Isabella, coached by her handlers, waved and smiled, a tiny, perfect doll on display. Behind the pageantry, her real life began. Installed in her own apartments at Westminster, she began a new existence. Her days were a blend of lessons and carefully managed court appearances. She learned English, studied etiquette, and navigated the intricate social web of Richard's court. The king himself became her guardian and benefactor, visiting with gifts, exotic birds, illustrated books, music. He treated her with a kindness that blurred the lines between warden, father figure, and husband-in-waiting. She found friendship with other noble children, like Margaret Holland, who became her guide to the unspoken rules and simmering tensions of English politics. Through these friendships, Isabella, though still a child, began to perceive the cracks in her gilded cage. Richard was not universally loved. His rule was absolute, his temper notorious, and a faction of powerful nobles deeply resented his authority. The peace with France, which she embodied, was seen by some as weakness. For a few years, a fragile stability held. Isabella grew, her English became fluent, and Westminster started to feel like home. She was a quick study, absorbing history and politics from her tutors. She was beginning to understand the weight of the symbol she carried. But symbols are fragile things in the hands of ambitious men. The storm broke in 1399. Richard's cousin, Henry Bolingbroke, returned from exile with an army. The nobility, long discontented, flocked to his banner. The world Isabella knew shattered overnight. She awoke to find her English attendants gone, the palace courtyards filled with strange soldiers. Her friend Margaret arrived breathless with a warning. They were being moved to the Tower of London for safety. The Tower was a fortress, a palace, and a prison. For the first time, Isabella felt the cold touch of true political peril. Richard came to see her, a broken man, his kingship slipping through his fingers. He spoke to her not as a child, but as a political equal in a desperate situation. "There are those who seek to overturn the peace we built," he told her. The implication was clear. She was now a pawn in a deadly new game. What is the value of a child queen when the king who crowned her is overthrown? Richard was forced to abdicate. Not long after, he died in captivity, likely murdered. Isabella, now a 9-year-old widow and a queen without a kingdom, waited in the Tower to learn her fate. The new king, Henry IV, entered her chambers. He studied the poised, intelligent girl before him. She was a problem, a diplomatic asset, a potential spark for French intervention. Henry offered her a path back to France, but with conditions. She must renounce her title and acknowledge him as the rightful king. It was a cruel choice. Accept exile and invalidate her entire life in England, or refuse and remain a prisoner indefinitely. At 10 years old, she was asked to make a decision that could reignite a war. Before she could decide, her father in France, in a rare moment of clarity, demanded her return. Facing French pressure, Henry let her go. In 1401, an 11-year-old Isabella crossed the Channel, leaving behind the only home she truly remembered. She returned to France a stranger, her French accented with English, her manners shaped by a foreign court, her childhood forever altered. The France she returned to was more fractured than ever. Her father's madness was worse. Her mother, Isabella, saw her not as a wounded daughter, but as a tool with unique insights into the English enemy. Isabella was pulled into the brutal factional wars that were consuming France, a conflict between the houses of Orleans and Burgundy. Yet, in this chaos, she found a chance at a real life. A marriage was proposed not to a distant king, but to her cousin, Charles, Duke of Orleans. He was 29, the same age Richard had been. But now Isabella was 14, a young woman, not a child. Charles was different, a poet, a patron of the arts, who saw and valued the remarkable woman she had become. He courted Isabella herself, not the political abstraction. Their wedding in 1406 was a celebration of choice, not coercion. For the first time, Isabella stepped into a role defined by mutual respect and affection. She embraced life as the Duchess of Orleans, patronizing artists and scholars, and advising her husband. She bore him 3 children, finding deep joy in motherhood, determined to give them the protected childhood she never had. She had transformed from a political pawn into a player of the game. But the game was still deadly. The French Civil War escalated. Charles's father was assassinated by Burgundian agents, thrusting Charles and Isabella into the heart of the violence. The cultured court became an armed camp. Isabella, drawing on her hard-won political acumen, helped manage their territories and even engaged in back-channel diplomacy, trying to prevent England from being drawn into the French conflict. Her health, never robust, failed her after the traumatic birth of her 3rd child. Weakened, she contracted what was likely tuberculosis. Facing her own mortality with the same courage she had shown her whole life, Isabella of Valois died in September 1409. She was just 20 years old. Her story is not one of passive victimhood, but of astonishing agency. She was handed a script written by powerful men, first as a child bride, then as a political prisoner. Yet, she learned the lines, studied the other players, and eventually rewrote her part. From a symbol of peace, she became a maker of peace. From a prize, she became a partner. Her legacy is the quiet triumph of the human spirit within the ruthless machinery of power. She reminds us that history is not just about kings and battles, but about the individuals, even the smallest, who navigate its currents and, against all odds, steer their own course. If stories of forgotten figures who shaped our past resonate with you, then the journey shouldn't end here. Winds of Thought is your portal to these hidden narratives. Help us bring more of these stories to light. Hit the like button and subscribe. And let us know in the comments, which historical figure's hidden story do you think deserves to be told next?